Let's go. It's Genesis 14:5. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, and they struck the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zazim in Ham, and the Emim in Shaveh, Kirathaim. In the 14th year symbolizes his first trial. Came Chedorlaomer. Chedorlaomer symbolizes apparent goodness in his outer self. And the kings who were with him symbolizes apparent truth linked with that goodness. And they struck the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shaveh, Kirathaim symbolizes persuasive lies, or rather the hells that do the persuading which the Lord defeated thoroughly. The symbolism of in the 14th year as his first trial can be seen from the symbolism of 14, or the end of a second week. As discussed, where a period of 7 days or 1 week symbolizes the beginning of a person's trials. A period of 14 days or 2 weeks has the same symbolism. The number, the symbolism. The number here is 14 because it looks back to the 12 of the previous verse, which meant the period of youth is noted. Period of youth is noted. The symbolism of Cain Chedorlaomer as apparent goodness in his outer self is established by the symbolism of a Chedorlaomer discussed at the last verse as apparent goodness and truth. Here he symbolizes only goodness because the text adds, and the kings who were with him, and these symbolize truth. The symbolism of the symbolism of the kings who were with him as apparent truth linked with that goodness can be seen from the symbolism of kings in the word. In the narrative and prophetic parts of the word, monarchs, kingdoms, and peoples symbolize truth, and everything connected with truth as a great deal of evidence can confirm. The word carefully distinguishes between a people and a nation. A people symbolizes truth, and a nation goodness, as shown previously. Peoples are said to have monarchs. Nations, for the most part, are not. Before the children of Israel agitated, what is this agitated? Agitated, maybe.
Agitated.
Agitated. Agitated.
Agitated.
Agitated, like excited.
Excited.
Excited. Agitated. Before the children of Israel agitated for kings, they were a nation and represented goodness or a heavenly quality. After they sought and received a king, they became a people and presented not goodness or a heavenly quality, but truth or a spiritual quality. This was the reason it counted against them as a flaw. What is this flaw?
Flaw.
Flaw. It's like defect. Blemish, shortcoming. It's like defect.
Defect.
Defect. Them as a flaw. I will have more to say on this elsewhere with the Lord's divine mercy, because the text here mentions Chedorlaomer, and that's the kings who were with him. Both goodness and truth are symbolized: goodness by Chedorlaomer, truth by the kings, but the nature of that goodness and truth at the threshold of the Lord's trials has been described above. And they struck the Rephaim in Ashteroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shaven. Kerithaim symbolizes persuasive lies, rather the hells that do the persuading, which the Lord defeated thoroughly. This can be seen from the symbolism of the Rephaim, Zuzim or Zazim, Zuzim, and Emim. They are the same type of being as the Nephilim mentioned in Genesis 6:4, who symbolize false persuasions or delusions. Or rather, they symbolize those whose delusions about their own importance and superiority caused them not to value anything holy or true, and who infused false thinking with perverse cravings. This symbolism was more than amply. Amply? What is this? Amply. Amply. Amply, like generously. Fully. Richly. Amply. More than amply demonstrated at verse. At that verse, see, and the verse is quoted there: Numbers, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Psalms. The three nations here, along with the Horites on Mount Seir, symbolize various types of persuasive lies. There are many kinds, differentiated not only by the falsity involved, but also by the appetite linked with or permitting them, or the appetite from which they spring and flow. People cannot possibly grasp what the different types of persuasive lie are like when they only barely know that such a thing exists, or that such a thing as an evil craving exists. In the other life, though, such things are arranged into their different categories and subcategories along very clearly drawn lines. The people who lived before the flood, particularly the ones called the Nephilim adopted the most dreadful lies as their convictions. These people were so bad that now in the other world, by the force of their persuasions, they rob the spirit they come across of any ability to think. The victims hardly feel as though they are still alive, let alone capable of thinking a valid thought. There is, as I have shown, as sharing of all thoughts in that world. So when a force as persuasive as this exerts an influence, it inevitably kills off all power of thought in others. This was the type of unspeakable nations the Lord fought and defeated in his early youth. Had he not done so, through his coming into the world, no one would be left on the planet today, because the Lord governs all of us by means of spirits. At the present time, these people's fantasies create around them a kind of foggy crack that they are always trying to break free from without success. For more information, see sections and many earlier sections. There are others like them meant by Isaiah. The dead will not live, the Rephaim will not rise, because you inflicted punishment on them and destroyed them and wiped out all memory of them. And in David, will you do a miracle for the dead? Will the Rephaim arise? Will they acclaim you? The dead here mean not the dead, but the damned. Some people today, especially those from the Christian world, also have delusions, but their delusions are not as horrendous as those of the pre-flood people. A convinced belief in falsity can involve both our voluntary voluntary voluntary
Voluntary.
voluntary both our voluntary and our intellectual sides as it did in the people who lived before the flood, and in those meant here by the Rephaim, Zuzim, and Emim. When it involves only our intellectual side, however, and rises out of false premises that we confirm in our own mind, it is a very different thing. This kind of conviction is not as strong or as lethal as that of the former people, but in the next life it still troubles other spirits a great deal, and in some measure deprives them of the ability to think. In people on earth, spirits who hold this kind of conviction stimulate only those ideas that tend to support falsity. They they leave us incapable of seeing falsity as anything but true and evil as anything but good. Their aura is what does it. As soon as angels call up any hint of truth, these spirits shock and smother it.
Smother.
Smother. Like suffocate. They shock and smother it. We can tell whether such spirits control us simply by this if we consider the truth of the word to be false, if we have proved this to ourselves so firmly that we are blind to any other way of thinking, we can be fairly certain such spirits are present with us and dictating to us. Again, when we convince ourselves that our own personal advantage is good for everyone, when we feel that nothing contributes to the larger good unless it also contributes to our own profit, the evil spirits with us offer so many confirmations that we cannot see otherwise. People who identify all self-interest with the common good or disguise it as the common good do the same in the other life with the common good there. Constant living experience has taught me to recognize that this is what spirit's influence on us is like. Hello everybody, maybe someone wants to read next verse. Genesis 14:6.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you want to read? Go.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, from the beginning of the page.
Uh, it's
Okay.
it's this verse and its spiritual meaning in Genesis 14:6.
Okay. Genesis 14:6. And the Horites on the mountain Seir, all the way to El Paran, which is up the wilderness. The Horites on the mountain symbolize the persuasive lives that result from self-love, all the way to El Paran, which is up the wilderness, symbolize the extent of them. The symbolism of the Horites on the mountain as persuasive lives that result from self-love can be seen from the symbolisms of the Horites and of Seir. To turn the Horites, they were people inhabiting Mount Seir, is indicated by Genesis 36:8, 20, and following verses, which mentions Esau, who is also called Edom in a positive sense. Is how say
Maybe
Esau
Esau,
in English?
Esau maybe Esau.
Oh,
Esau.
It's it's
Esau.
it's
But in my
it's a
language,
name like.
is Esau.
Mhm.
Esau.
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 Esau. Okay. Esau, Edom, symbolizes and at the same time represents the Lord's human quality. Much evidence in both the narrative and the prophetic parts of the word demonstrates this, as will be discussed later sections with the Lord's divine mercy, because the Horites represented people who per persuade themselves of falsity, and because representations in those days have tangible reality, the occasions on which Esau's descendants drove the Horites of Mount Seir represents the same thing as the present verse. So, in Moses' words, this too is considered the land of Rephaim. In the Rephaim lived it before, and the Ammonites call
What is tangible? Yeah, tangible. What is this?
I think it's like
Tangible.
visible.
Visible. Mm-hmm.
Tangible.
Palpable. Yeah, visible material like real. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
like real reality, visible reality.
Very.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then Zen zooming, a people large in numbers and tall as the Anakim, and Jehovah destroyed the Rephaim before the Ammonites, and they took possession of them and lived there in place of them, as he did for the children of Esau, living in Seir. In that he destroyed the Horites from before them, and they took possession of them and lived there in place of them. Deuteronomy 2:20, 21, 22. These details represent and symbolize the same thing as those given concerning Chedorlaomer here, that he and the kings with him struck the Horites on the Mount Seir. Chedorlaomer, as I said, represents the godliness and truth Lord when he was wrong. As a consequence, he represents the Lord's human side in regard to the goodness and truth he then had. which he used for demolishing persuasive facts. That is, he used his goodness and truth to crushing hell's filled with the devil's persuasive screw. Hells that tried their hardest to destroy the world of spirits and through it the human race by means of their convincing lies. Science, since
Sin-
Esau,
Mhm. Since. Mhm.
since Esau or Edom represents the Lord's human side, Mount Seir and Paran as well represent attributes of his human side, namely the heavenly qualities of love. This can be seen from Moses' blessing. Jehovah came from Sinai and downed from Seir on them. He shone out from Mount Paran and came with the holy myriads. Out of his right hand came into fire of a law for them. Yes, he loves the people. Deuteronomy 33:2-3. The sole thing meant by Jehovah downed from what means downed?
Dawn. It's like dawn, like morning. Morning, I think. Dawn. Yeah.
Dawn.
It's like. It's like anything middle between night and morning, like dawn. Mm, Maybe if I can demonstrate the picture to better memorize this word, like dawn. It's about yeah. Do you see it's dawned? Maybe this picture, like dawned. Mhm. A light has dawned like this. Yeah, it's like in morning, early morning.
It's the opposite of twilight, né?
Maybe 5 a.m. 5 a.m. o'clock.
Okay,
Yeah.
understand.
Mhm.
Jehovah down from Mount Seir and shone out from Mount Paran. Is the Lord's human nature. Anyone can see that dawning from Mount Seir and shining out from Mount Paran has to do not with mountains of their inhabitants, but with divine matters. It symbolizes the heavenly qualities of the Lord's human nature and describes Jehovah as dawning and shining out from this. The symbolism of Seir as the Lord's human side can be seen from the Song of Deborah and Barak in Judges. Jehovah, when you came out from Seir, when you marched from
Marched.
the field,
It's
march.
it's marched. It's not marched. I think it's marched. Listen,
Marched.
marched.
Oh,
Marched.
Mhm. Like parade. Marched.
from the field of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens also showered. Yes, the clouds showered water, the mountains streaming down. This is Sinai, in the presence of Jehovah, the God of Israel. Judges 5:4-6. The sole thing meant by the coming out from Seir and marching from the field of Edom is likewise the Lord's human side. In it, it's more obvious still in the prophecy of Balaam, who was one of the children of the East, or in other words, who came from Syria, where a remnant of the ancient church provided. The prophecy appears in Moses. I see him, but not yet. I view him, but he is not near. A star will rise out of Jacob, and a scepter will spring up from Israel, and Edom will be an inheritance. Inheritance. And
Inheritance, yeah.
inheritance. Inheritance. Will Seir be for its enemies? Numbers 24, 17, 18. Seeing him, but not yet. Viewing him, although he is not near. Is the Lord's arrival in the world. His human side is called a star that will be rise out of.
It's scepter. Is it like skepta? Scepter.
Scepter.
Mm-hmm.
Scepter.
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 What mean?
Do you know? It's like staff of king, like rod of a king. It's the attribute of power. I think like.
Okay. The king that the king holds.
Yeah, it's like maybe like weapon of king. Yeah, what it means. It's like power. Mm-hmm. It's like rod.
Okay.
Scepter.
Jacob, and it's also called Edom and Seir. Anyone can see that Edom and Seir will not be inheriting the statement that Seir would be inheritance of its enemies or the mountains of its enemies is the same as the frequent insistence elsewhere Israel's enemies will be banished and the land taken.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mount Paran or El Paran, mentioned in the present verse, has the same symbolism as well, as can be seen from the Habakkuk. God will come from Teman and the Holy One from the Mount Paran, Selah. His majesty covered the heavens, and the earth was filled with his praise. Habakkuk 3:2.
Mm-hmm.
Is it important to know, however, that the mountains and the lands take their symbolism from the residents living there, from the Horites when they lived there, from the people who displaced them when they were driving out, from Isha
Driven.
or
It's
driven.
driven. Mm-hmm. It's the third form. Dry, draw, driven. Yeah,
Driven.
we're driven.
Driven.
Driven. Mm-hmm. Driven.
Okay. Driven out from Isha or Edom and from others too. This is true of both meanings, positive and negative. In a positive sense, they stand for the Lord human nature, and in a negative sense for self-love. The Lord's human nature is heavenly love itself. Self-love opposes heavenly love. So the Horites here symbolize persuasive lies rising out of self-love. Persuasive lies result from self-love and from materialism. Those results from self-love are extremely patriot.
But
Those
putrid. What is this? Putrid.
Putrid.
Mm-hmm. Putrid.
Putrid.
It's like rotten. Yeah, rotten.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Those resulting from materialism are not as bad. those resulting from self-love stand opposite to the heavenly kinds of love. Those resulting from materialism oppose spiritual kinds of love. Those resulting from self-love carry within an urge for absolute power, loosen the restraints, and they run wild, so much so that they seek to lord it over the whole universe, or even over Jehovah, as shown before. Consequently, persuasion, pers, pers, persuasion,
Persuasions.
persuasion,
Persuasions. Persuasions.
okay,
Persuasions.
Persuasions.
persuasion.
Persuasions.
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 Persuasions. Persuasions.
Persuasions of that type are never tolerated in the other life. Persuasions rising out of materialism, on other hand, do not run as wild. They only drive us crazy with dissatisfaction over
Dissatisfaction.
dissatisfaction.
Dis, like satisfaction and dissatisfaction, like
Dissatisfaction.
displeasure, discontent, dissatisfaction.
So that we strive vainly from for heavenly joy and seek to take the belongs of others for our own, with far less intent to control. But the difference between the two types of delusion are beyond counting.
I finished.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
oh.
All the way to El Paran, which is up the wilderness, symbolize the extent of those persuasions, as can be seen from the fact that the Horites were struck and fled afar. The wilderness of Paran is mentioned in Genesis 21:21, Numbers 10:12, Deuteronomy 1:1. What El Paran is, which is in the wilderness, symbolized here is not very easy to explain. I can only say that the Lord's first victory over the hells that are symbolized by the nations did not yet reach any further. The lengths to which did reach,
Oh,
the lengths to which it did reach are symbolized by El Paran. Up in the wilderness. Those who have not received the opportunity to learn the secrets of heaven might imagine that there was no need for Lord to come into
I
the
hear a
world.
big noise from someone. Who's moving? One second. Someone is noising. It's like it's Alexa. Alexa, is it you who is
oh,
noising? Can you
no,
turn
no,
off
no,
your
no,
microphone? No, because it's a big noise
no.
from your microphone.
I'm not, bro.
Thank you. Mhm,
That is VV.
mhm. Go on.
Those who have
Repeat it.
not received
Mhm,
The-
the opportunity to learn the secrets of heaven might imagine that there was no need for the Lord to come into the world in order to fight the inhabitants of the hells and defeat and conquer them by letting himself be put to test to the test. He could have subdued them and shut them up in the hell simply by his divine omnipotence. Such people might believe, yet it is unshakable, true,
Unshakably, yeah, unshakably, like
unshakable.
shake. It's from shake, yeah, shake.
Unshakably.
Yeah, like I shall not be moved. Like I will be unshakable.
Oh, okay. True that he did not need to. Unraveling two secrets just in their general outlines would take a whole book, and it would take another to make enough room for rational arguments about such divine mysteries. Even then, human minds would not still be unable and for the most part unwilling to comprehend them, no matter how well they were explained. It is enough to know and believe this eternal truth, since it is true. Had the Lord not come into the world and subdue and vanquish the hells by willing undergoing trial, the human race would have perished. Human beings could not have been saved in any other way, not even those on our planet who live in the days of the very earliest church.
What
I
is
go on?
vanquish?
Vanquish.
Vanquish.
Mhm.
Vanquish.
Vanquish.
It's like defeat, conquer. It's about victory.
Oh,
Winner.
all
Vanquish.
right.
Thank you
Vanquish.
very much. Who
Thank
wants to read next verse? Maybe Genesis 14:7. Genesis 14:7. Okay. And they turned back and came to an misfat, that is Kadesh, and struck every field of the Amalekites, and also the Amorite living in Hazazon Tamar. They turned back and came to an misfat, that is Kadesh, means a continuation, and struck every field of the Amalekites, symbolizes general categories of falsity, and also the Amorite living in Hazazon Tamar symbolizes general categories of the resulting evil. The meaning of they turned back and came into an misfat, that is Kaddish, as a continuation can be seen from what precedes and from what follows. The current theme is falsity and the evil in which it results. The Amalekite symbolizes falsity, and the Amorite in Hazazon Tamar symbolizes the resulting evil. Kadesh symbolizes truth, but also disputes about truth. Disputes, like dispute. It's not verb, yeah. It's dispute, noun.
Disputes.
Disputes. Mhm.
Disputes.
Like debates, disputes about truth. Disputes about truth. The theme here is falsity, and the evil is results in, and the evil it results in, which the Lord overcame the first time he contended against it. So the present verse mentions an misfat, that is Kadesh, since there was strife over the truth. The symbolism of Kadesh as truth under dispute is visible in Ezekiel, where the borders of the visionary Holy Land are defined. The southern side toward the south, will be from Tamar all the way to the waters of Meribah, quarrels of Kadesh, the inheritance at the Great Sea, and this will be the southern side toward the south. The south stands for the light of truth, the boundary of the place, which means quarreling over truth, is called Kadesh. Kadesh was also the place where Moses struck the rock from which water gushed, and the water was called Meribah, from a word meaning quarrels. A rock symbolizes the Lord as is known. Water on the word's inner plane symbolizes what is spiritual or truth. It is called the water of Meribah because of the strife over it. The fact that it was also called the water of quarreling in Kadesh is clear in Moses. You rebelled against what I said in the wilderness of Zin, in the quarreling of the congregation, that you should consecrate me with the water in view of them. This was the water of quarreling in Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. Likewise, Kadesh was where the scouts returned to from the land of Canaan, and where the people murmured and bickered. What is this bickered? Bickered.
Bickered.
Bickered, like argue. Quarrel, bickered, argued. Bickered, not wanting to enter the land. This evidence shows that an misfat, that is, fountain of judgment, or the fountain of misfat, or Kadesh, symbolizes disputes over truth and so means a continuation. Since the history here is real history and happened as described, it may seem as though such things could not be represented or symbolized by the places Chedorlaoma came to or by the nations he struck, but all the history in the world, the places, the nations, the events represents and symbolizes something as is obvious from all the details in both the narrative and prophetic parts of the word. And struck every field of the Amalekites symbolizes general categories of falsity, as can be seen from the representation and symbolism of the Amalekite nation. All the nations that lived in the land of Canaan represented categories of falsity and evil, as the following will establish by the Lord's divine mercy. The Amalekites symbolized falsity, and the Amorites in Hazazon Tamar symbolized the evil that springs from falsity. The fact that the Amalekites symbolized falsity that combats truth can be seen from mention made of them in Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Judges, Samuel, Psalms. The Rephaim, Zuzim, Emim, and Horites mentioned in verse 5 and 6 symbolized persuasive lies rising out of evil cravings, or in other words, out of evil. In the present verse, though, the Amalekites and the Amorite in Hazazon, Tamar symbolize falsity that results in evil. Falsity that springs from evil is one thing. Falsity and the evil that springs from it is not the same. Falsity bubbles up either from cravings which belong to the will or from the assumptions we make which belong to the intellect. Falsity that results from cravings in the will is vile. What is vile?
Vile.
Vile. It's like disgusting, low, horrible. Vile is vile and does not easily allowed itself to be uprooted, since it clings to our actual life. What we crave, that is what we allow, is our actual life. When we justify this life, this appetite, this love in ourselves, all our justifications are falsities, and they are grafted onto our life. That is what happened with the people who lived just before the flood. However, falsity developing from our assumptions, which belong to the intellect, cannot take very deep root in our volitional side. An example is false or heretical 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 doctrines. Heretical.
Heretical.
Transcription is like heretical, but heretical. Yeah, I heard like heretical, maybe. Well, let it be heretical. Heretical doctrines which originate outside our will, we are indoctrinated in them from childhood on and later confirm them for ourselves as adults. As they are false, however, they cannot help producing bad effects in our lives. For instance, when people believe they earn salvation by doing good deeds and confirm themselves in this idea, the resulting evil is the sense of merit itself, along with self-righteousness and smugness. What is smugness?
Smugness.
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 Complacency. Smugness, maybe I
Humid.
can see in dictionary. Smugness. It's like joy, highly self-satisfied. Jimo, smart in dress. Okay. On the other hand, when people believe it is absolutely out of the question for their lives to be godly if they do not place merit in good works, the resulting evil is that they surrender to desire and pleasure and wipe out any trace of a godly life in themselves. It is similar in many other areas. These are the types of falsity and resulting evil that form the theme of the present verse. And also the Amorite living in Hazazon Tamar symbolizes general categories of the resulting evil. This can be seen from the remarks just above and from the representation and the symbolism of Amorites, which are mentioned below in Genesis 15:16. In regard to the evil and falsity that the Lord fought, it needs to be known that they consisted of hellish spirits devoted to evil and falsity. In other words, they consisted of hells filled with evil and falsity, which were constantly plaguing. What is this plaguing?
Constantly plaguing.
Plaguing.
Plaguing. Thank you, plaguing. It's like torment, tormenting, plaguing. Constantly plaguing the human race. Hellish spirits want nothing less than to destroy everyone, and nothing thrills. What is thrills?
Thrills.
Thrills, like excitement, a sharp sensation, kick, deep emotion. Nothing thrills than more than causing pain. In the other world, all spirits are divided up in this way. Those who wish evil on others are hellish or diabolical spirits, but those who wish well to others are good or angelic spirits. We can tell which group we are associating with, hellish or angelic. If we intend harm to our neighbors, think only evil thoughts about them, actually hurt them when we can, and enjoy doing so, we are associating with hellish spirits and become hellish spirits ourselves in the other life. If we have good intentions toward our neighbors, though think only good thoughts about them, and actually do them good when we can, we are associating with angelic spirits and become angels ourselves in the other life. This is the sign. Examine yourself by this standard if you want to know what you are like. To refrain from doing good, to refrain from doing evil when one cannot or does not dare is worth nothing. It is also worthless to do good for selfish reasons. These are superficial efforts that we lay aside in the next world. In that world, we are what we think and what we intend. There are many who know how to speak well from a lifetime of practice, but others sense immediately whether their mind or heart is in it. If not, they are sent away to join hellish spirits of their own kind. Mhm. Genesis 14:8-9. Who wants to read? Mhm. Nobody wants to read? Next. Okay. And the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar, went out and marshaled, marshaled the battle, marshaled,
Marshaled.
marshaled like rank, marshaled the battle with them in the valley of Siddim with Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, and Raphael, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elizar, four kings against five. The king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar, went out, symbolizes the evil and falsity that were in general controls as it did before. And marshaled the battle with them means that they attacked. In the valley of Siddim, here as before, symbolizes something unclean. With Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elizar, symbolizes truth and goodness in the Lord South itself. Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, symbolizes truth. Tidal, king of Goim, symbolizes goodness, and the others symbolize everything that results. Four kings against five symbolizes the unity of the truth and goodness and the disunity of the evil and falsity. The king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah and the king of Admah and the king of Zeboim and the king of Bel, which is Zoar, went out symbolizes the evil and falsity that were in general control. This can be seen from remarks above at verse 2 concerning these kings, identifying them with evil cravings and false conviction. At that point, these monarchs as a group symbolized all evil and all falsity, or to put it another way, evil cravings and false persuasions, which is why that verse said that war was made with them. Afterward, the text deals with war against the Rephaim, Zuzim, Emim, and Horites, then against the Amalekite and Amorite, and finally against these same kings named at the start. As a result, in the current verse, they symbolize simply the prevailing evil and falsity, which are less serious. The meaning of marshaled the battle with them as the fact that they attacked can be seen from the symbolism of marshalling a battle as making an assault. What is this? Assault.
Assault.
It's like violence, robbery, attack. Since verse 4 above says that they rebelled. These words also demonstrate that evil spirits are the ones who attack. The case is that the Lord never initiated a fight with any hell. The hells attacked him. This is also what happens to each of us when we are being tested. That is when we fight evil spirits. With us, angels never mount an attack. We never mount. Mount. In this sense, never mount an attack. Maybe like connect. With us, angels never mount an attack, but the evil, hellish spirits never stop attacking. Angels only deflect and defend against the attacks. This comes from the Lord, who never wants to hurt anyone or force anyone down into hell, not even the worst or most hostile of all his enemies. It is actually his enemies who hurt themselves and hurt themselves into hell, hurl themselves into hell. This situation also follows from the nature of evil and the nature of goodness. Evil by its nature wants to wound everyone. Hostile. It's like enemy. Hostile. To wound everyone. Goodness by its nature wants to hurt no one. The evil feel they are fully alive when they go on the offensive. It is offensive. Offensive, like aggressive. Offensive. Because they are always wanting to destroy. The good feel they are fully alive when they are not attacking anyone but are taking advantage of the opportunity to help others by protecting them from evil. The symbolism of in the valley of Siddim as something unclean can be seen from statements made above at verse 3 about the valley of Siddim and the Salt Sea. With Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elazar, symbolizes truth and goodness in the Lord's outer self, as can be seen from the symbolism of the same words in verse 1 of this chapter. Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, symbolizes truth. Tidal, king of Goyim, symbolizes goodness, and the others symbolize everything that results. This is indicated by the change from verse 1 above in the order of their last listing. Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, appeared in the third place there and appears in first place here, and Tidal, king of Goyim, appeared in fourth place there in second here. It is truth that is the first requirement for battle, because truth is the weapon we fight with. Truth enables us to recognize falsity and evil, so we never engage in these battles until we have absorbed secular knowledge and the knowledge of truth and goodness. Kedorlaomer, named first here, therefore, symbolizes the truth possessed by the Lord. The same thing can be seen from the symbolism of Elam as the faith that develops out of a love for others, since this faith is the same thing as truth. The symbolism of Elam was illustrated earlier at Genesis 10:22. It follows that Tidal, king of Goyim, that is of the nation, symbolizes goodness, and that the other kings symbolize the further truth and goodness that result. 4 kings against 5 symbolizes the unity of the truth and goodness and the disunity of the evil and falsity, as the symbolism of 4 and 5 shows. 4 symbolizes unity because it symbolizes pairings, just as 2 does when it has to do with the marriage between things, as noted at 5, however, symbolizes disarray. Disarray.
Disarray.
Disarray, like confusion, disorder, disturbance. Disarray because it symbolizes a small amount, as illustrated at all meanings depend on the subject and the discussion. Maybe any comments, or maybe someone wants to read next verse. Genesis 14:10. Nobody wants to read? Okay. Genesis 14:10. And the valley of Siddim was pit after pit of tar. And the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah fled and fell there. And the rest fled into the mountain. The valley of Siddim was pit after pit of tar, symbolizes dirty lies and dirty cravings. Of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah fled and fell there means that those evils and false cities were conquered. And the rest fled into the mountain means that not all of them were. A mountain is self-love and materialism. The valley of Siddim was pit after pit, or full of pits of tar, symbolizes dirty lies and dirty cravings. This can be seen from the symbolism of Siddim as filth discussed above. At verse 3, it can also be seen from the symbolism of pits as lies and of tar as cravings. Lies are called pits here because of the dirty water these pits held, and cravings are called tar because of the foul, sulfurous smell in that water. Sulfurous.
Sulfurous.
Sulfurous. Sulfurous smell in that water. The king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah fled and fell there, means that those evils and false cities were conquered. This is borne out by the symbolism of Sodom and Gomorrah as evil desires and distorted convictions, meanings dealt with earlier. Here the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah stand for all the evil and falsity symbolized by the other kings as well. The meaning of the clause, what is this?
Clause.
It's close. Section like this. The meaning of the clause is also borne out by the symbolism of fleeing and fallen as being conquered. The rest fled into the mountain means that not all of them were conquered, as can be seen without explanation from the fact that the ones who escaped survived. The inner meaning speaks of the trials the Lord endured when he was young. Not a word is said about them in the New Testament scriptures, but only about his crisis in the wilderness or just after he came out of the wilderness. And finally, about his last crisis, which began in Geth- Gethsemane. Gethsemane. From his early youth up to the last hour of his life in the world, the Lord's life was one continuous struggle and one continuous victory, as many passages in the Old Testament would indicate. The Lord's trials did not end with the test he faced in the wilderness, as these words in Luke show. After the devil had finished all his testing of Jesus, he left Jesus alone for a while. The same thing can be seen from the consideration that the Lord was tested up till his death on the cross, and so till the last hour of his life in the world. This evidence makes it clear that the Lord's whole life in the world, from early youth on, consisted of constant trials and constant victories, the last of which occurred on the cross when he prayed for his enemies, and so for everyone, everywhere in the world. The world's description of the Lord's life in the Gospels mentions none of his trials outside his final crisis except for the one he faced in the wilderness. No others were revealed to the disciples. Those then were revealed seem so mild that they hardly amount to mild. What is this mild? No, it's
Mild.
like soft, weak, calm. Those that were revealed seem so mild that they hardly amount to anything as far as the literal story goes. To speak and answer in that way is no trial. The fact is, though, that he was tested more severely than any human mind could ever grasp or believe. No one can know what a spiritual crisis is like except the person who has lived through one. The trial mentioned in Matthew, and Mark, and Luke sums up all the Lord's trials, which consisted in his battling the self-love and materialism that filled the hells out of love for the entire human race. All trials target. Target. All trials target the love we feel, the severity. What is this? Severity.
Severity.
It's like ferocity, cruelty,
Ferocity.
ferocity,
Severity.
severity. The severity of the trial matches the nobility of the love. If love is not the target, there is no trial. To destroy a person's love is to destroy the core of that person's life. Since love is life, the Lord's life was love for the whole human race, a love so great and good that it was pure, unallow, unalloyed love. What is this? Unalloyed.
Unalloyed.
Unalloyed, like pure, plain,
Plain.
and unalloyed love. He allowed this life of his to be attacked continuously, as noted, from the dawn of his youth until his final moments in the world. Love, which was the absolute core of the Lord's life, is symbolized by this. He was hungry, and the devil said, "If you are the Son of God, say to this stone that it should become bread." And Jesus answered, "It is written, humankind is not to live by bread alone, but by every word of God. He fought against materialism and everything bearing its stamp, as symbolized by these words. The devil led him up onto a tall mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the inhabited world in a moment of time and said, I will give you all this authority and the glory of these kingdoms, because it has been given to me, and I give it to anyone I want. If you will worship before me, then they will be yours. But answering him, Jesus said, Go back behind me, Satan, for it is written, You shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone you shall serve. He fought against self-love and everything bearing its stamp, as symbolized by these words. The devil took him into the holy city and stood him on a pinnacle of the temple and said to him, If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will carry you, to keep you from stumbling your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, Again it is written, You shall not test the Lord your God. His constant victory is symbolized by the statement that after his trial, angels came close and tended to him. In short, the Lord was attacked by all the hells from early in his youth up to the very end of his life in the world, while he was continually routing, subduing, and vanquishing. What is this? Vanquishing them.
Vanquishing.
Vanquish him like conquer. It's about victory, overcome. And vanquishing them. This he did purely out of love for the entire human race. Since his love was not human but divine, and the greater the love, the harder the struggle, you can see how fierce his battles were and how savage on the part of the hells. This is how it was, as I know for certain. The fact that a mountain is self-love and materialism can be seen from the symbolism of a mountain as discussed just below. All evil and falsity spring from self-love and materialism. They have no other origin. Love for oneself and love of worldly advantages are the opposite of heavenly and spiritual love, and since they are the opposite, they are personified by people who work ceaselessly. What is this? Ceaselessly.
Ceaselessly.
It's like continually, ceaselessly. Who work ceaselessly to destroy anything heavenly or spiritual in God's kingdom. Self-love and materialism give rise to all hatred to all vengefulness and cruelty, and vengefulness and cruelty to all deceit. In short, to all the hells. The symbolism in the words of mountains as self-love and materialism is illustrated by the following passages. In Isaiah, the eyes of human pride will lower, and the loftiness of human beings will sink. The day of Jehovah Sabaoth will come over all the proud and lofty, over all the lofty mountains, and over all the tall hills, and over every high tower. Clearly, the lofty mountains stand for self-love, and the tall hills for materialism. In the same author, lofty mountains.
Lofty.
Very high, lofty. Every valley will be raised up, and every mountain and hill will be lowered. Here too, they plainly stand for self-love and materialism. In the same author, I will devastate mountains and hills, and all their grass I will wither. Again, the mountains stand for self-love, and the hills for the love of worldly things. In Ezekiel, the mountains will be torn down, and the stairs will fall, and every wall will fall to the earth. In Jeremiah, here now I am against you, destroying mountain, destroying the entire earth, and I will stretch my hand out against you and draw you down from the rocks and make your mountain aflame. Flame like fire, yeah? A flame. Yeah, flaming.
Aflame.
Flame, burning. This describes Babylon and Chaldea, which symbolize self-love and love of worldly advantages as shown before. In the Song of Moses, a fire was kindled in my anger, and it will burn all the way to the lowest hell, and it will consume the earth and its produce, and torch the foundations of the mountains. The foundations of the mountains stand for the hells, as it explicitly says. The hells are called explicitly, like exactly,
Explicitly.
clearly, clearly, in detail, explicitly. Says the hells are called the foundations of the mountains because self-love and materialism reign supreme there and come from there. In Jonah, water surrounded me right to my soul. The abyss circled me. Seud was bound onto my head. To the excavitation. What is this? Excavitation.
Excavation.
Excavation.
Excavations.
Excavations.
To dig up something.
Yeah, it's like excavator, yeah? From this.
No, I mean you can do it with other tools, not the excavator. That's too big a machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has the same root, yeah? Excavation and excavator, yeah? Because it's, it's about digging, yeah?
Yep.
Mhm. To the excavations of the mountains I went down. The poles of the earth lay about me forever, but you brought my life up out of the pit, Jehovah my God. These prophetic words depict the Lord's struggles against the hells as Jonah's ordeal in the belly of the huge fish. What is ordeal? Ordeal.
Ordeal. Ordeal.
Ordeal. It's like severe test, trial. A deal in the belly of the huge fish. Other passages in the Word, especially in David, do the same thing. Those in spiritual crisis are in hell. Being in hell has nothing to do with vocation and everything to do with state of mind. From the symbolism of mountains and towers as self-love and materialism, we can deduce what it meant when the devil took the Lord onto a tall mountain and onto the pinnacle of the temple. It meant that he was being led into the very worst of his spiritual battles against love for himself and for the material world, or in other words, against the hells. It is opposite sense, the usual one. Mountains symbolize heavenly love and spiritual love, as demonstrated earlier in hardly anyone can see what the battles of spiritual crisis accomplish. They are the means for dissolving and shaking off evil and falsity. They are also the means by which we develop a horror for evil and falsity and gain not only conscience, but strength of conscience. And this is the way we are reborn. For that reason, people who are regenerating are thrust onto combat and undergo terrible trials, if not during their physical lives, then in the other life, assuming they can regenerate. In consequence, the Lord's church is called the church militant. The Lord alone relied on his own strength or power to endure his spiritual crisis and the savage conflicts they entailed. The hells are besieges. The hells all besieged him, and he continually gained total victory over them. It is the Lord alone who does the fighting in people facing their own spiritual battles and who conquers. By our own power, we cannot accomplish anything at all against evil, hellish spirits, because they band together with the hells in such a way that if one hell were overcome, the next would rush in to fill the void. This would continue forever. They are like the ocean beating on the individual stones in a jetty. Jetty. Mhm.
Jetty.
Jetty. It's like a pier.
Pier.
Pier. Jetty. If it managed to open a chink of a tiny crack in the jetty, it would never stop until it had broken down and overflowed the entire structure, leaving not a trace. That is how it would be if the Lord did not bear our battles by himself. Mhm. Maybe someone wants to read next verse. Maybe any comments? And who wants to read next? Genesis 14:11. Because I was reading a lot, and maybe someone can continue. Mhm. Okay. Nobody wants to read? Be bolder. Don't be afraid. Just believe. Mhm. Okay. I think this reading is over because my brain is tired. I have to go. Goodbye.